And the tech monopoly ends. And no dumbest bill in America. This is Mark Fisher with Mark and the Millennials. And the millennial joining me today is, of course, Christopher Hopkins, our producer on the other side of the camera. Welcome, everyone, to Mark and the Millennials. This podcast is called Tech Monopoly Ends. What does that mean? Well, as you know, ladies and gentlemen, we have been speaking about, as has the mainstream media, as they panic, good old Elon Musk potentially buying Twitter. Potentially. Okay, he announces, the way this works is, first you announce you're going to buy something, and it's obviously a pretty big deal for an individual to buy a publicly traded company, but there's a lot more to it than that. Usually, these announcements fail for a whole variety of reasons. In this particular case, ladies and gentlemen, the Twitter board has unanimously approved Elon Musk's $44 billion purchase bid. So in the Daily Caller, also in the Wall Street Journal and all the major newspapers, Twitter's board unanimously recommended Tuesday that shareholders approve billionaire Elon Musk's offer to buy the social media site for $44 billion. Musk told Twitter employees earlier in June that he still planned to move forward with the purchase despite shares in the company remaining significantly lower than his offer price. The Associated Press reported he noted on Tuesday that approval of the purchase by shareholders was one of a number of unresolved matters halting his purchase. The outline continued. And look, ladies and gentlemen, the Twitter board, obviously, as a general principle, there were a good amount of people on that board who did not like the idea because they didn't want to give up their control of Twitter. And by their control, the Twitter board members owned very little Twitter stock, but they didn't want to give up the power that they had as a result of being on the board. And naturally, with Elon Musk coming on, what do you think the first thing he's going to do? He's going to clean house on the board. He's going to make sure there is a board that actually is invested in the company, that has a stake in the company, that actually wants to see the company succeed. Because after all, Elon Musk is transforming Twitter from a publicly traded company to a privately held company, in which case he can do whatever he wants, he and his investor group. So the Tesla billionaire's offer would net a profit of $15.22 per share for investors if it closed. If it closed today, that is. The AP noted Musk offered to pay $54.20 per share, despite them falling short of his number upon opening bell Tuesday, the outlet reported. And Elon Musk tweeted out, "This is where the writers are, of past, present, and future." Twitter's board of directors said in a filing with the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission that it unanimously recommends that you vote for the adoption of the merger agreement. Musk has previously said that Twitter, quote, will neither thrive nor serve this societal imperative in its current form. Twitter needs to be transformed as a private company, end quote. He then offered to buy the entirety of the company in order to unlock the extraordinary potential of the social media platform. Twitter founder and former CEO Jack Dorsey has praised Elon Musk's decision to purchase the platform and has also said that he will never be CEO again. So this is kind of interesting, ladies and gentlemen, because remember, our impression at Mark and the Millennials, and I think yours is too, of Jack Dorsey is that he's like a completely left-wing nut job. But so why would Jack Dorsey then, here's the question, why would Jack Dorsey then support Elon Musk buying Twitter and taking it private? There's a lot of reporting out there. I must say, I don't know if it's true or not, but there's a lot of reporting that Jack Dorsey was forced to move the company and engage in massive amounts of censorship at Twitter because the board was making him do so. There's a lot of information out there. Now, look, most normal CEOs, most normal people would understand that censorship would be naturally bad for a platform because the more engagement that you have, the more active your platform is used. That is a good thing. But for whatever reason, Jack Dorsey, backed down and at a minimum is a coward, in my opinion, because he should have just told the board, hey, look, this is what I'm going to do. Naturally, ladies and gentlemen, the board would have replaced him then, which is probably why he did it, because boards have that power to replace the CEO. So the politics are that Jack Dorsey decided to go along and get along. Big mistake, I think, certainly for Twitter. And now we see that Dorsey is openly saying he's really happy that Musk is buying it, because obviously what Dorsey really wants is for Twitter, at least it appears that he wants Twitter to have, to be an open platform, to allow free exchange of ideas. And certainly that's what Elon Musk wants as well. So I read that article to you about it being a reality now that Elon Musk is going to purchase Twitter. Now, to be fair, it has not closed. But look, if the board says, yes, we're all about this, then it's a done deal. And we have some comments. I just wanted to read a couple. It says, one is from Rooster Cogburn. I love that. I can't help but wonder how much sabotage and destruction of evidence is going on at Twitter right now. There are a lot of tracks to cover. So that's from Rooster Cogburn, talking about how the Twitter employees, now knowing that their board has agreed for Twitter to be acquired by Musk, certainly the employees there have a lot of things to hide. That's what Rooster Cogburn is referring to. Speedo Mars says, Musk is unstoppable, a master at his craft. Another person, Thino1 Skin Fan, says, I'm about 50-50 when it comes to Musk, but why do you think Twitter unanimously approved it? They unanimously approved it so as not to let him off the hook for the $44 billion. They know that they are guilty of fraudulent numbers, which he has called out on them. So now if he wants out, it will be more difficult. Vox Veritatis, once Twitter discloses the vast number of known and knowable fake accounts, bots, etc., their fraudulent claims will be exposed and the stock's value will plummet to its proper level. Musk is way too smart to pay the fraud-inflated price for Twitter. Well, that is kind of like the general consensus here in the comments. By the way, it's also the general consensus by Elon Musk that Twitter is cheating as to how many active, true members/subscribers it really has on its platform, and how many are real versus how many are fake. But you know what? Maybe Musk is willing, now that Twitter has agreed to be acquired by that initial price, maybe Musk is willing to just say, you know what, let's just make this happen. Let's make it happen because of the simple fact that we need a free and open platform. And maybe it is truly worth this money because Elon Musk can free up the true value of Twitter by having anyone say what they want, when they want to, and to have a free exchange of ideas. And so as a result of this, ladies and gentlemen, I think this is really the day that the tech monopoly ends, because you have a board that was a completely and utter woke board at Twitter that hate Elon Musk, that hate free speech, that have truly been the individuals responsible for not pushing back against Twitter employees and or against Jack Dorsey to make it a closed platform for anyone that is a conservative and cancels anyone that's a conservative. Well, today, that tech monopoly ends. Today, Twitter, I think, has officially acknowledged through its board that it can be acquired by Elon Musk for this, yes, albeit inflated price, but nonetheless, it means that there will be, on a major tech platform in the United States of America, for the really first time, free speech. Free speech. And then the question is, well, how many of the little 15-year-olds at Twitter, how many of the 15-year-olds at Twitter are going to cry and rant and be upset now that the board has done this? And how many are going to quit? And more importantly, how many will Musk actually fire? Because, I'm sure there is a list of individuals at Twitter who don't believe that a platform like Twitter should be open. And if you have employees who are willing to sabotage the company because they don't believe the platform should be open, then you probably need to terminate those employees. how else, of course, do you move forward then if you keep them on? Because you can't be certain that they're actually going to stay there. And that is, and the tech monopoly ends. So next up, podcast listeners, Biden may request a gas tax extension. This is really interesting. This story is a lot more interesting than I think you realize out there in podcast land. Remember, Joe Biden is all in on the climate change agenda. Well, now we're approaching an election, and the Democrats are just getting hammered, of course, with all the polling data that's coming back. They're getting hammered on issues such as the economy, energy, inflation, and food inflation in particular, other things too. But certainly those three things. And so you might say, well, naturally, that's what a president of the United States would do. A president of the United States would call for the federal gasoline tax to have a holiday, kind of just suspend it for a while to ease on the gas prices. There's a problem, though, and here's what's not obvious. Joe Biden's people, the people that put him in office, these are the climate change zombies, and they are zombies. They're going to be furious at Joe Biden. And since they are going to be furious at Joe Biden if he actually follows through, then what you're going to see is these climate zombies starting to unelect people. Here's why this matters. Here's why this is so. Joe Biden cannot willy-nilly eliminate or create a gas tax holiday. He needs Congress to do it. Think about that. Congress must lead the effort to suspend the federal gas tax and create a gas tax holiday. Now, follow me on this. Congress is controlled by whom? Democrats. Well, if you're a Democrat and you're a sitting Democrat and you are in the United States House of Representatives, or you're a sitting Democrat and you are in the United States Senate, and these bills typically start, obviously, in the House of Representatives, you have those Democrats who are all in on the climate agenda. Their hands are tied. They're not going to be able to vote for a federal gas tax holiday because their left flank, their supporters, are going to unelect them in the primary. Or their supporters are going to be unmotivated to show up in November to vote for them if their primary is already over. So they have a real problem. The other problem they have is, the Democrats in Congress, is if they don't vote at a minimum to suspend the federal gas tax, then Republicans are just, of course, going to show up in even greater numbers, which I think they already are. I think all of the data shows that, because it's just going to prove to Republicans that Democrats are incapable of being critical thinkers and understanding that when in times of national crisis, you need to suspend your ideology and your religion of climate change and help everyday people with their living expenses, namely to reduce gas taxes. Albeit it's a tiny little gas tax in the overall scheme of things, but it helps. Every little bit helps. So Biden and the Democrat Party have a huge problem. They either get rid of the federal gasoline tax for a period of time, in which case their left flank is going to try to unelect them. Certainly in the primaries they will. Or they have the issue of actually doing nothing, in which case the American people, including many, if not most people in the middle, are going to say, we're done with you. We're done with you. And certainly, as we're going to talk about later, Hispanics, Asians, we're looking at one cohort after another that are fleeing the Democrat Party, one after another, which we're going to talk about later. So in the Wall Street Journal, Biden says he is near a decision on backing a federal gasoline tax holiday. You guys are going to love this, though. You're going to love what the Democrats are going to try to concoct. A Democrat-led effort to pause tax of 18.4 cents a gallon have stalled amid GOP opposition. Average fuel cost hits almost $5 a gallon across the nation. Remember, this is the average across the country. It almost is at $5 per gallon. So the gas tax is 18.4 cents. The federal gas tax, as you probably know, your state has a gas tax as well. In some cases, even your local government, depending on where you live, has a gas tax. So President Joe Biden said Monday, that was yesterday, that he may make a decision within days on seeking a pause to the federal gasoline tax as Americans deal with soaring gas prices. Mr. Biden told reporters in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware, that he is considering a gas tax holiday. Quote, I hope to have a decision based on the data I'm looking for by the end of the week, he said. Gas prices started increasing last year and surged following Russia's invasion of the Ukraine, which disrupted the global oil market. The average cost of a gallon of unleaded fuel in the U.S. hit $4.98 on Monday, according to AAA. That is up from $3 a year ago. Any suspension in the federal gas tax of 18.4 cents a gallon would actually require Congress. So far, Democrat-led efforts to temporarily pause collecting the tax have failed to gain traction. So think about that. The Democrats in Congress haven't been able to get the traction they need to suspend the federal gas tax. And that is in large part because of the Democrats who don't want to be at odds with their base. In the United States House and Senate, Republican leaders largely oppose suspending the federal gasoline tax. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell has accused Democrats of playing political games, noting that any gasoline tax relief would expire soon after the midterm elections. Well, so look, we need to talk about this for a moment. That's true, okay? Suspending a tax is not the same thing as eliminating a tax, because all you're doing is putting a Band-Aid on the problem. But the thing is, I would have to respectfully disagree with Senator McConnell on this and say, yeah, you do need to suspend the tax. I mean, people are really hurting in every aspect of the economy. And as you all know, energy affects every part of our economy, including food, because you need energy to grow the food, to cultivate the food, because you need tractors and so forth. And you need energy to harvest the food and energy to send the food to market. So costs of energy affect everything. And so Mitch McConnell, while he may be right that this is a political game by Democrats to buy off votes, and we will talk about that in a minute as well, the fact of the matter is that you need to do something, okay? And since the Republicans aren't in charge of the White House and they're not in charge of Congress, they must obviously follow the lead of the Democrats, whatever the Democrats want. By follow the lead, I mean at least do something to help the people in the country. Critics of a suspension of the gas tax say oil companies may only pocket the tax relief without passing savings on to consumers. Others point out that the tax makes up only a small part of the overall cost of gasoline. And some say state and federal gasoline tax decreases could jeopardize much-needed road and bridge improvements, including projects to be funded by last year's $1 trillion bipartisan infrastructure law. So this is kind of funny, right? We've got to break this down. So last year, the Biden administration passed the $1 trillion, it's actually, I think, $1.2 trillion bipartisan infrastructure law. I love how they say bipartisan. 6 people who are Republicans voted for it, but it's bipartisan. And they passed the infrastructure law based on the precept that it would be paid for by the gas tax. Okay? So now they want to suspend the gas tax, which means that you won't be able to pay for the $1.2 trillion of spending that you already voted for and passed. Because the gas tax does not pay for that $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill over the course of 12 months. You need that gas tax over the course of like a decade to pay for it. And then, so there's that. The other thing in this paragraph in the Wall Street Journal, which is very misleading, I think, a very poorly written article in terms of facts is the quote, others point out, now they don't reference who the others are. Others point out that the tax makes up only a small part of the overall cost of gasoline. Actually, that's not true, ladies and gentlemen. If the federal gas tax, if the federal gas tax is 18.4 cents per gallon, all right, that's what the article is saying. If it's 18.4 cents per gallon, then you also have the state tax. So in my state, for example, the tax is scheduled to increase by, I think, another 7 or 8 cents. So it will be like well into the 30s, like 34 cents a gallon. So 34 cents a gallon plus 18 cents a gallon, ladies and gentlemen, we're talking real money. So this quote in the Wall Street Journal, others point out the tax only makes up a small part of the overall cost of gasoline. No, actually, that's not true. The tax makes up a very large part of the cost of gasoline because governments are so greedy they can never get enough money from you in the form of taxes. And then the other part of the article, and some say state and federal gasoline tax increases could jeopardize the road and bridge improvements in the infrastructure bill. What a bunch of nonsense. See, this is part of the problem. When you have a United States Congress that spends money that isn't in the budget, right? The money's not there. They're anticipating the money coming in from a tax. And so then when you have a crisis, they can't suspend the tax because they already spent the money. Therein lies the problem. At a news conference in Toronto on Monday, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen said that, of course, she's such a genius on economics. She said that studies of gas tax holidays at the state level have shown much of the tax relief is passed on to consumers. The evidence for a suspension of the federal gas tax is more mixed, she said. Nonsense. Quote, she says, I think it would be some pass-through to prices at the pump and some portion that would end up raising the base. But nevertheless, consumers are really hurting from higher gas prices, she said. It's been a substantial burden on American households, and I think, while not perfect, it is something that should be under consideration and as a policy to address it. Of course, you know what they don't say? You know what the Biden administration doesn't say? Hey, do you know what? If we actually increase the supply, then actually the price will decrease. But they don't talk about that because they don't believe in supply and demand. They believe in command and control. A White House official said, the president has made clear that he is willing to explore all options and hear all ideas that would help lower gas prices for the American people. Conversations remain ongoing. At the state level, the gasoline tax issue cuts across traditional partisan politics, with both Republicans and Democrats supporting various relief measures. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is the Wall Street Journal. This is not the end of the article. This sentence is utterly untrue. I'm going to read it again. At the state level, the gasoline tax issue cuts across traditional partisan politics, with both Republicans and Democrats supporting various relief measures. That's not true. In my home state of Maryland, the Republicans have called for a special session to suspend the gas tax. And the Democrats will not call a special session to suspend the gas tax. The Democrats, do not support gas tax relief measures. It's a lie, Wall Street Journal. Harvard University's Lawrence Summers, a former Treasury Secretary himself, criticized the idea on Sunday as a gimmick. You eventually have to reverse the gas tax if you suspend it. Speaking on NBC's Meet the Press, he also said that he thought the dominant probability would be that by the end of next year, we would be seeing a recession in the American economy, which I guess what he's referring to is then you're not going to buy hardly any gas at all, which means the supply increases of gasoline, the price decreases because you're broke. The president said Monday that he spoke with Mr. Summers that morning and reiterated that he doesn't see a recession as inevitable. Yeah, Biden, the brilliant economist, calls the economist from Harvard, who says, a left-wing economist, mind you, who says there's going to be a recession, and Biden's like, no, there's not. No, there's not. Stop saying that. Stop saying there's going to be a recession. The Federal Reserve this month agreed to a 0.75% point rate increase in borrowing costs, the largest interest rate hike since 1994, and signaled it would continue lifting rates this year at the most rapid pace in decades to fight inflation that is running at a 40-year high. So this article is written by Catherine Lucy and Andrew Duran of the Wall Street Journal. And the quite frankly, ladies and gentlemen, the article is complete and utter BS, because I can tell you that the blue states will not suspend the gas tax. And the reason the blue states will not suspend the gas tax is because the Democrats, the left wing, out of control, nut job, climate zombies that control those legislatures in those states have no intention of suspending the gas tax. So Democrats do not support relief at the pump. Okay? Let's get this straight right now, Wall Street Journal. Democrats don't support relief at the pump. Democrats support increasing gas taxes. Case in point, California is set for a scheduled gas tax increase at the end of the month. This is in the Daily Wire. In the midst of high fuel costs and rising inflation, California is set to raise the tax on gasoline at the end of the month. A scheduled increase in the excise tax rate is due for July, which will add 3 cents per gallon to gas prices for California drivers. So here you have a state, California, the largest state in the country by population, and, also the largest economy of a state out of all the 50 states. In that state, run by left-wing climate zombies, okay, people that believe climate, the whole climate religion thing, to them it is a religion, no doubt. They are all about raising the tax more and crushing the middle class and the poor even more. The California state legislature could decide to delay the tax. Of course they could. Or they could give Californians a rebate. Using the state budget surplus to hold off on the tax is up for debate, but some leading Democrat legislators aren't going for that option. They think it's possible that gas suppliers could eat up those savings and not pass them on to consumers. And also because they went through a very, by the way, those are the Democrat legislators that don't believe in supply and demand as well. And also because they went through a very, very harrowing political battle when they passed this gas tax increase back in 2017. Emily Hoeven, writer at Cal Matters, said California Governor Gavin Newsom has pushed for a proposal to send $400 cards to California drivers. There they go again. And so, ladies and gentlemen, in podcast land, here is Democrat Economics 101. Okay? First, you tell everybody that under the guise of climate change, that gas prices should be as high as possible to crush the middle class and the poor. Then you keep increasing gas taxes to make it harder and harder for people to own a car and to operate a car, certainly a car on combustible engines. Then you increase, of course, the cost of electricity. Then, after you create dependency based on how high gas prices have become, you create complete dependency. In other words, people are like, oh my gosh, I need my government to provide relief to me. Well, your government caused the problem. But you want government to provide relief to you. Then you have, in the blue states, Governor Gavin Newsom, as an example, saying, you know what we're going to do? We have a proposal to send you a $400 gas card to make up for all of the bad stuff that we've done to ruin your middle class status or to make you even poorer than you were yesterday. And then the day before that. So we're going to give you a $400 gas card. And then what happens? Then you now have a middle class who wasn't dependent, who pride themselves on being independent from government. Now they are dependent on government. Now we have a new entitlement. The new entitlement is that gas is so high that you can't afford to get from point A to point B. So now you're going to go back to government and say, can I have another $400 gas card, please, Mr. Government? Can I have another one? So California drivers would allegedly get those $400 gas cards to help with the costs. But the measure that is proposed by Gavin Newsom hasn't gotten support in the Democrat-controlled state legislature. However, Hoeven, who's with Cal Matters magazine, noted that some legislators aren't in favor of Newsom's strategy and would rather give $200 checks to people based on income level. So it would be income based. It would be income tested before you could get the $400 or $200 gas card. So ladies and gentlemen, podcast land, I must tell you, I have seen this so many times with Democrats in blue states. I live in a deep blue state who is exactly like California. The state of Maryland's gas tax is going to increase next month, the month of July, because it's on automatic increases because the increase in Maryland's gas tax is based on the CPI. So as you can imagine, with inflation, the gas tax is increasing exponentially, and the Democrats in Maryland don't want to suspend the gas tax either. But you know what they love to do in Maryland is after they completely ruin your way of life, after they completely destroy the middle class and make them poorer, which is all Democrats know how to do, then they try to make you dependent with these kinds of basically complete and utter jokes. I mean, they're all gimmicks, which is to give you money to now make you dependent because, by the way, the person who gives you $400 gas cards is the person what? That you're going to vote for. So naturally, if you're a poor person, if you're poor, you might say, and I know what you're going to say out there, ladies and gentlemen, you're going to say, oh, well, that means you don't even have a car. That's not true. There are plenty of poor people that have a car, but the car's like 12 years old, 15 years old. And they'll certainly they'll get the $400 gas card. By the way, I know people who don't have cars who will rent cars when they need them. So you rent the car and they rent a very modest car, like a really small car. And then you get the $400 gas card to pay for the gas in the car. So then you go to where you're going to go. And what are you going to do from that point forward? Well, all of the elected officials who voted for this scheme are going to send you through the mail little flyers to say, hey, vote for me. I gave you a gas card. And what happens in the real world? Well, in the real world, people are going to say, okay, great. I'm going to vote for you because you gave me a gas card, rather than thinking critically, which is like, dude, you're the reason I needed a gas card. I could afford gas before, but now I can't. The whole reason I need a gas card is because of your idiotic policies based on climate change, your climate change religion. But the average American, unfortunately and very sadly, is not capable of thinking in a critical way because they're not taught to think critically. And therefore, they will take that card and they will then vote for that individual. By the way, I wonder if these gas cards that they're proposing in California go to illegals as well. Of course they do. Of course they do. Why wouldn't you if you're a California Democrat? And so to add to the pain and the stupidity of the left, in Europe has decided to go back to coal to generate electricity after Putin cuts off the natural gas. So this is a brand new story today. European nations are firing up idled coal-powered plants to make up for lost energy supplies after Russia slashed natural gas exports to Europe this month. Just this month, this has happened. Russian state-backed energy companies cut liquefied natural gas exports last week, leaving Europe in search of alternative energy sources. Germany, Austria, and the Netherlands recently announced moves to increase energy production from previously converted or discontinued coal-fired facilities in order to meet the demand. So, in Europe, ladies and gentlemen, you have the left-wing governments in Europe who are all in on climate change religion, who shut down coal-powered facilities. Now, shut them down. They still exist, but they shut them down and have decided, oh, well, we actually can't operate our economies anymore because we are dependent on fossil fuels from Russia. So it was all a lie to begin with. They're lying to their people, the left-wing governments that run these European countries of Germany and the Netherlands and Austria, lying to their citizens and saying, you see, we cut down that dirty coal-powered plant and therefore we're completely green. No, actually, they never were because they were still buying natural gas from Russia, which ran their economies. And now that they can't get the natural gas, what are they doing? They're having to do what? They're having to fire back up their coal-fired plants to generate electricity the old-fashioned way, but nonetheless the reliable way, and become energy independent. Germany announced on Sunday an initiative to restart power plants that burn coal and offer incentives for companies to economize on natural gas consumption. The Wall Street Journal. So there you go again. So this is another liberal thing, right? The left is trying to tell you there isn't enough supply. We're running out. No, actually, we're not running out. We're just running out of smart people to run governments. Quote, it's obviously Putin's strategy to rattle us, drive up prices, and divide us. We won't allow that. We will defend ourselves resolutely, precisely, and thoughtfully, said German Vice Chancellor and Green Party leader Robert Habeck, according to the WSJ. So the Green Party in Germany, ladies and gentlemen, is the party based on its name, as I'm sure you figured out, who's all in on the climate change religion. But now, of course, the Green Party, who's in charge, Robert Habeck, the German vice chancellor, he's like, well, yeah, about that green thing, we realize we still got to run our economy, so we're going to do what's necessary to keep things moving. It's like if you just did that to begin with, we wouldn't have this issue. This issue meaning Russia wouldn't feel empowered to invade its neighbors. Dummy. The move aims to increase Germany's gas stores. You gotta love this. They want to increase their gas stores now. Currently at around 50%, almost to full capacity in preparation for winter. Habeck explained, officials see coal, a resource that emits higher amounts of carbon dioxide other than fossil fuels, according to the U.S. Energy Information Administration, as the next best option. So in the DC Energy Science tweet, it says, Europe to rely more on coal as natural gas demand fades. That which is a lie, of course. Natural gas demand hasn't faded. Natural gas demand has disappeared because Russia has turned off the natural gas. Now, you would think in the United States of America, the left would look at this as an example and say, gee, this is what happens when you don't have energy autarky. Okay? Autarky, self-sufficiency. A nation state needs energy autarky. A nation state needs food autarky. A nation state needs microchip autarky. A nation state needs a lot of industries, pharmaceutical autarky. We can just go down the list. In order to be a true nation state and to remain a nation state and to remain independent from the whims of the so many evil people across the world that wish us ill. Problem, ladies and gentlemen, is in the United States of America today, many of the people that wish us ill live here. and they're called Democrats. They're called Democrats. And you'll love this one. Wind turbines, this is ABC News, by the way. Okay, this is not some right-wing news outlet. ABC News is reporting wind turbines bound for the landfill because of hefty recycling expenses. Now, of course, that's a bit of a lie, naturally, the way they entitled this, but the way they titled it, wind turbines bound for landfill because it's too expensive. Yeah, not true. Not true. But we're going to read the article. You're going to love this. Researchers from the University of South Australia are urging renewable energy companies in the state to come up with an end-of-life plan for their aging wind turbines. A study led by Professor Peter Majewski indicated that tens of thousands of old turbines could end up in landfills by the end of the decade. Worldwide, there could be as many as 40 million tons of blade waste in landfills by 2050. Ladies and gentlemen, I will stop here and say this. If you've ever seen one of these wind turbines and you've ever seen the size of the blades, they are massive. Wind turbines have a lifespan of 10 to 20 years. That's actually not true. The steel turbines, the steel that holds them up, has a lifespan of a much longer period of time. The actual blades do not have a lifespan of 10 to 20 years. The lifespan is less than that, and are expensive to break down due to their size and the fact that they are made from a mixture of composite materials, including glass fiber, carbon fiber, polyester, and epoxy resins. Now think about this, ladies and gentlemen. The reason why the wind turbines are so strong, the blades are, is because when you have winds hitting these wind turbines, and they're at the 150-foot level high or higher, then what ends up happening is, by definition, the drag from the wind, obviously you need blades that are really, really strong. But when you make the blades really, really strong, you also find it hard when you remove them to replace them, to recycle them, because they can't be recycled. Now, could they be broken down? Maybe. Could you grind them up? I presume. I don't know. I mean, I would think you could. But right now, there's no plan because they can't be recycled. And this article says the key problem is there's not a lot of money in it, so recyclers don't have a huge income stream. Of course there's no money in it, because what are you going to do with them? You're going to put them inside of a landfill. But the left is going to tell you all day long, wind blows all the time and therefore it's renewable. There's only one problem with that. While that may be true that the wind does blow and it is renewable because it does blow from time to time, some places more than others, granted, I'll give you that. You still need to replace the blades. And that's not renewable. So it is a lie. And the gears inside the systems of the wind turbines are also requiring petroleum. What a surprise. So this whole segment is important because first we have Biden requests a gas tax suspension. Then you have the Californians, the deep blue left, far left, crazy climate change zombies who are okay with a gas tax increase. Maryland Democrats, fine with the gas tax increase. And then Europe, who did the same thing as California and Maryland, and the same thing as the Biden administration, is now running back to coal. Isn't that incredible? Just incredible. It's amazing how much the left messes up and how little people actually hold them to account for their stupid, stupid policies. So next up, podcast listeners, we are on our heels. The Democrats are reportedly confronting their campaign leadership after Republicans flip the Texas seat. So this is in the Daily Caller, but it's across all of the news outlets because, let's face it, the Democrats know that they're in trouble. Latino Democrats, not Latinx, Latino Democrats, confronted their campaign chair Wednesday after Republican Texas Representative-elect Mayra Flores flipped a South Texas seat red in a special election Tuesday, according to Politico. So in other words, Republicans flipped this seat in a special election. So there's one more Republican in Congress and one less Democrat. Democrat Texas Representative Sylvia Garcia and Democrat Texas Representative Veronica Escobar were among the congressional members who demanded a meeting with Democrat Congressional Campaign Committee, which is the DCC chair, and Democrat New York Representative Sean Patrick Maloney, according to Politico. They reportedly wanted to focus the Latino exit from the Democrat Party. Ladies and gentlemen, remember, this is pretty epic because you have Biden letting in primarily Latinos across the southern border of the United States in the millions with the intent of flipping states across the country. And then you have in Texas, the state that they want to flip the most, actually flipping the other way. Quote, I don't know that it's an intervention, but it's going to be a hard talk. It's going to be a good, healthy family discussion, Garcia told Politico. The DNC and the DCC, all the Democrat national groups really need to take a hard look at what happened. I realize this is a special election, but it's still given the Republicans a narrative to say, see, we flipped a seat and we should have done better. Democrat Representative Gonzalez, who is set to face Flores in November, pulled Maloney aside on the steps of the Capitol to implore the party and the party leadership to make changes in Latino outreach before the trend seen in Texas goes national, according to the outlet. Therein, ladies and gentlemen, lies the biggest threat to the Democrat Party that has probably existed since Ronald Reagan took office and crushed the Democrat Party, namely the fact that there is a Latino exit from the Democrat Party that could go national. Ladies and gentlemen, if that were to go national, if Democrat Party would be done, they'd be done completely. So CNN sounds the alarm on another voting bloc fleeing the Democrat Party. High Asian American turnout in races across the country could signal a mass exodus from the Democrats, much like what is occurring among Hispanics, CNN reported Sunday. So, ladies and gentlemen, we just talked about Hispanic exodus, but now CNN's worried about an Asian exodus. The successful recall campaign against San Francisco District Attorney Chesa Boudin is one example. CNN's senior data reporter Harry Enton wrote, observing that Asian Americans were a key factor in the vote. Boudin's disapproval numbers were among the highest among Asian Americans and Hispanic voters prior to his recall. Boudin was recalled with 55% of the vote. CNN reported, quote, Asian American voters are sick and tired of Democrats hurting our families by causing the highest inflation in 40 years, defunding the police, and ending merit-based education. RNC spokesman and director of Asian Pacific American Media, Nanoa Johans, told the Daily Caller News Foundation. From the election of Glenn Youngkin in Virginia to the recall of San Francisco's Chesa Boudin, the numbers show that the AAPI community is leaving the Democrat Party behind in droves, and the shift is only accelerating. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm here to report to you that it's not just that the Democrat Party is on their heels, but in addition to that, we have a Democrat Party that is losing key demographics, two in particular. The Hispanic vote, okay, Hispanics, but also now Asians in California. And that is the last thing that the Democrat Party needs. And that's it for Mark and the Millennials. Thank you for joining Mark and Millennials. This is Mark Fisher. Thank you to our producer, Christopher Hopkins. Check us out on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Getter, Truth Social, Rumble, and our website. See you next time.